Ladies and gentlemen, in moments of betrayal, insult, or unfair treatment, the instinct is to react loudly, emotionally, and immediately. But today, I want to offer a different lens, one rooted in neuroscience and psychology. Let silence be your revenge. Silence is not weakness, it is the ultimate expression of control. In the brain, control comes from the prefrontal cortex, the command center that overrides emotional impulses coming from the amygdala. When you choose silence over retaliation, you're not just being the bigger person, you're exercising elite neurological discipline, you're rewiring yourself to favor long-term outcomes over short-term emotional release. When you engage in a verbal battle or lash out, your limbic system is in the driver's seats, specifically stress circuits that flood your body with cortisol and adrenaline. These chemicals were designed to help you run from predators, not argue online or retaliate to a personal jab. The cost is high: reduced clarity, emotional fatigue, and damage to your credibility. On the other hand, silence sends a powerful message, not just to others, but to your own nervous system. You are unshaken. You are self-directed. You are conserving your dopamine, your attention, and your energy for things that truly move your life forward. Your silence becomes unsettling to others because it removes the feedback loop. They don't know what you're thinking, they can't provoke you, and most importantly, they don't control you, and that's the real point. Revenge isn't about destroying others, it's about proving you're beyond their reach. Silence is how you demonstrate that. Let your success, your peace, and your progress do the talking. That's not passive, that's strategic. In the end, you'll find that the most powerful form of revenge is no revenge at all, only forward motion. Quiet, focused, and unstoppable. Thank you. Silence is often misunderstood. In many cultures, it's mistaken for weakness, passivity, or the absence of an opinion. But in reality, silence, especially in the face of conflict or provocation, is one of the most potent demonstrations of psychological and neurological control a person can display. It is an act not of avoidance, but of mastery. From a neuroscience standpoint, the ability to remain silent, particularly when emotionally triggered, is rooted in one of the most advanced parts of the human brain, the prefrontal cortex. The prefrontal cortex is the executive center of the brain. It's responsible for judgment, planning, decision-making, and emotional regulation. When we are provoked by an insult, betrayal, disrespect, or injustice, the brain's threat detection system, particularly the amygdala, gets activated. This part of the brain is fast, emotional, and primal. It's designed to keep us safe from danger, and it does so by preparing us for fight or flight responses. But while that response was useful in ancient environments full of physical threats, in today's world, reacting with aggression or defensiveness usually does more harm than good. This is where the prefrontal cortex comes in. Its job is to inhibit these automatic responses when they are not useful or appropriate. This inhibition is not passive, it requires effort, training, and energy. Choosing to stay silent when every fiber of your body wants to defend, attack, or lash out is an elite neurological skill. It means your prefrontal cortex is doing exactly what it was designed to do: override emotional reactivity and allow space for reflection, strategy, and control. In a reactive state, the brain becomes less capable of nuanced thought. When cortisol and adrenaline flood the system, blood flow shifts away from the prefrontal cortex toward the more primitive brain regions. This is why people often say things they regret in the heat of the moment. They are literally less capable of rational thinking. In contrast, when a person chooses silence, they maintain access to their higher cognitive functions. They remain in control not just of their words, but of their inner state. Silence also provides space for internal processing. When we do not react immediately, we give ourselves time to understand what's really going on. Was the insult personal or a reflection of the other person's pain? Is the perceived betrayal actually malicious, or could it be the result of miscommunication or ignorance? Reactivity removes the opportunity to ask these questions. Silence, on the other hand, creates room for clarity. It's also important to understand that silence is not the same as suppression. Suppression is when we bottle up our emotions without processing them, often leading to long-term stress and health issues. Silence, as self-regulation, is different. It's a conscious act of redirection. The person practicing it is aware of their feelings but chooses not to be ruled by them. This builds resilience. Over time, the brain learns that not every emotional spike requires immediate action. This reduces the frequency and intensity of stress responses and builds emotional endurance. There's also a social and psychological dimension to this kind of silence. In conflict situations, people often expect a reaction. They feed off the energy of confrontation. When you give them none, no anger, no justification, no explanation, you break the expected pattern. This unpredictability creates a form of quiet power. It sends the message, "You do not control me. I am not programmable." It shifts the psychological balance in your favor, not because you won a verbal exchange, but because you opted out of the game entirely. This is not about moral superiority, it's about practicality. Reacting emotionally often leads to escalation, regret, and wasted energy. Silence conserves your mental and emotional resources for things that matter. And from a neurological standpoint, this conservation is significant. Emotional reactivity drains the brain's energy. Every angry outburst, every emotional rant costs neurochemical fuel, dopamine, serotonin, norepinephrine. By staying silent, you're preserving these limited resources and redirecting them toward productive thought and action. Silence also strengthens self-identity. Each time you choose not to react, you reinforce the belief that you are someone who operates with discipline, not impulse. This identity shift builds internal confidence, not the kind that shouts or argues, but the kind that doesn't need to. It creates a sense of calm power that others can sense, even if they can't explain it. In relationships, personal, professional, or public, this kind of self-regulation builds respect. People may not always agree with you, but they will come to understand that you are not easily shaken. You listen more than you speak. You respond only when it serves a purpose, and when you do speak, it carries more weight because it is rare and intentional. That kind of presence cannot be faked. It is built over time through thousands of moments where silence was chosen over reaction. From a developmental standpoint, this is a skill that can be trained. Mindfulness practices, breath work, and deliberate pauses before speaking are all ways to strengthen prefrontal control. These practices increase the gap between stimulus and response, a space where consciousness lives. In that space, we reclaim agency over our reactions. To be clear, silence is not always the right choice. There are times when speaking up is necessary, even urgent. But when your only purpose in speaking is to defend your ego, retaliate, or prove your worth, silence is almost always the better strategy. Not because you're conceding, but because you're choosing not to engage at a level beneath you. Ultimately, silence as self-regulation is not about pretending you don't feel hurt, angry, or disrespected. It's about choosing how to use those emotions. Instead of throwing them outward, you channel them inward into clarity, into focus, into discipline. You transmute emotional noise into strategic signal. And in doing so, you become the kind of person who doesn't need revenge because your presence, your progress, and your peace are more than enough. Silence, then, is not the absence of response. It is a refined, deliberate act of leadership over self. It's a message, not just to others, but to your own nervous system, that you are in control. And in a world that constantly provokes reaction, that kind of control is a rare and powerful form of freedom. When we talk about behavior, particularly in the face of provocation, stress, or challenge, we're not just dealing with psychology, we're dealing with biology. The body and brain are wired to respond to threats with speed and intensity. This wiring is ancient and deeply embedded in our nervous system. Reactive behavior is a byproduct of that design. It arises from neural circuits that are fast, emotional, and often subconscious. When someone insults us, undermines us, or pushes our buttons, it is these circuits, particularly those governed by the amygdala and other parts of the limbic system, that jump into action. This is what's known as a stress response, and it's designed to protect us from harm. But in modern life, it often backfires. The stress circuits are built for survival. When the brain perceives a threat, physical or emotional, it initiates a cascade of responses. The hypothalamus signals the adrenal glands to release stress hormones like adrenaline and cortisol. These chemicals flood the system, sharpening certain responses while dulling others. Heart rate increases, muscles tense, attention narrows. This is useful in life or death situations, but not in everyday social conflict. When you react impulsively, when you yell, argue, defend, or retaliate, it's not just a personal choice. It's a biological reflex, and one that often bypasses critical thinking. The cost of this reactive behavior is significant. While it may feel momentarily satisfying to speak your mind or put someone in their place, the long-term consequences are rarely beneficial. Reactivity tends to escalate conflict, damage relationships, and erode trust. On a neurological level, it weakens the pathways involved in higher-order thinking and strengthens the pathways of impulsivity and emotional volatility. It reinforces the brain's tendency to respond automatically rather than intentionally. Over time, people who are chronically reactive develop a kind of emotional rigidity where they become increasingly sensitive to stress and less capable of adapting to complexity. In contrast, when we choose silence, or more broadly, non-reactivity, we engage an entirely different set of neural circuits. These are slower, more deliberate pathways associated with the prefrontal cortex. This region of the brain is involved in executive function, planning, perspective, taking, emotional regulation, and self-control. It allows us to pause, assess, and choose a response that aligns with our long-term values rather than short-term emotions. In this way, silence isn't passive, it's a form of cognitive engagement. It signals that the brain is shifting from survival mode to mastery mode. What's particularly interesting is that the very act of pausing, of not reacting, can change the structure and function of the brain over time. This is due to neuroplasticity, the brain's ability to rewire itself based on experience. Each time you refrain from reacting, you strengthen the neural circuits associated with patience, discernment, and self-regulation. You begin to recondition the nervous system away from reactivity and toward conscious choice. This doesn't mean you don't feel anger or frustration. It means you don't let those emotions hijack your behavior. Silence, in this context, becomes a training ground for mastery. You're not avoiding the situation, you're approaching it differently. Rather than feeding the stress circuits with energy, you're redirecting that energy toward observation and interpretation. You're giving yourself time to understand what's happening, not just externally, but internally. Why did that comment trigger you? What story are you telling yourself about this situation? What outcome do you actually want? These are questions that reactive flight response. It has more capacity to activate the parasympathetic nervous system, the branch responsible for rest, recovery, and calm. This shift has profound implications for mental and physical health. Lower cortisol levels lead to better sleep, improved immune function, enhanced cognitive performance, and greater emotional resilience. Simply put, people who are less reactive tend to live longer, think clearer, and experience more peace. There's also a social dimension to this dynamic. In interpersonal relationships, reactive behavior often signals insecurity or lack of self-regulation. It says, "I can be controlled by your behavior." In contrast, silence or non-reactivity signals composure, strength, and confidence. It says, "I choose how I respond, regardless of your actions." This doesn't mean being cold or disengaged. It means being selective with your energy. You don't owe anyone an instant reaction. You reserve your words for moments that require clarity, not impulse. Mastery circuits also give you access to nuance. They allow you to see that not every provocation requires a response. Not every challenge is personal. Not every insult deserves your energy. The ability to discern what is worthy of your attention is a hallmark of psychological maturity. And silence is often the first indication that someone has reached that level of discernment. Importantly, silence is not the same as suppression. Suppression is when you ignore or push down your emotions, often leading to long-term psychological harm. Mastery is about feeling fully but choosing intentionally. You're not denying your anger or pain, you're acknowledging it and deciding how to use it. Sometimes that means expressing it directly. Other times it means transforming it into focus, discipline, or strategic action. The difference is in the choice. Reactivity is automatic, mastery is deliberate. It's worth mentioning that building this kind of neural strength takes time and effort. It doesn't come from reading quotes or adopting slogans. It comes from practice, real, difficult practice. It comes from moments where your ego is inflamed and your body is flooded with emotion, and you choose to breathe, observe, and hold your response. Over time, this practice becomes internalized. The brain learns that silence is not just a lack of noise, it's a signal of power, clarity, and self-trust. Eventually, you reach a point where silence becomes your default, not out of fear, but out of freedom. You're no longer reacting because you don't need to. You're not caught in other people's emotional storms because you've built shelter within yourself. This is the essence of mastery, the ability to remain grounded in your own values, undisturbed by the chaos around you. So, while reactive behavior may be natural, it is not optimal. It activates circuits designed for survival, not success. Silence, on the other hand, activates circuits of reflection, regulation, and growth. It may not always feel heroic in the moment, but over time, it creates a life that is less chaotic, more intentional, and deeply powerful. And that is the quiet triumph of mastering the self. The human brain is a limited resource system. Every thought, emotion, and action draws on a finite pool of neurochemical energy. This energy, primarily in the form of neurotransmitters like dopamine, serotonin, norepinephrine, and acetylcholine, fuels cognition, focus, motivation, mood regulation, and decision-making. What we choose to engage with, especially emotionally charged interactions, directly affects how these resources are spent. Choosing not to engage, particularly in situations of conflict, drama, or provocation, is not about apathy. It is a strategic act of conservation. It is about reserving energy for what genuinely matters rather than depleting yourself on what is fleeting or meaningless. In the face of conflict or insult, the instinctive response is to defend, retaliate, or explain. These reactions come at a neurobiological cost. Just initiating a verbal or emotional response activates a cascade in the nervous system. Stress hormones like cortisol and adrenaline surge through the bloodstream, preparing the body for a fight or flight response. Simultaneously, the brain burns through glucose and neurotransmitters to support elevated mental processing. The heart rate accelerates, muscles tense, and attention narrows. All of this might feel like an empowering rush, but it's expensive. It leaves you mentally and physically drained, sometimes long after the confrontation has ended. That depletion matters. You wake up each day with a limited supply of attention and emotional regulation. These are not infinite resources. Every time you engage in unnecessary conflict, you burn through some of that supply. Think of it like a budget. If you waste your funds on every impulse buy, on every argument, every snide remark, every petty disagreement, you'll be bankrupt by midday. By contrast, when you refrain from engaging in things that don't serve your goals, you preserve your internal capital for meaningful work, relationships in this part of the brain. You send it the message, this is what matters, this is where I want my energy to go. The brain adapts, it prioritizes calm, clarity, and control over chaos. There's also a longer-term benefit to this approach. Chronic engagement in conflict, especially low-grade, repetitive emotional stress, can erode the brain's ability to regulate itself. Over time, high cortisol levels shrink the hippocampus, which affects memory, and impair the prefrontal cortex, which governs decision-making. Meanwhile, the amygdala, the part of the brain that generates fear and anger, grows more reactive. You become more irritable, less patient, and more prone to overreaction. This creates a feedback loop in which you're more likely to get drawn into further unnecessary conflicts, further depleting your energy and compounding the effects. By contrast, non-engagement interrupts this loop. It allows the nervous system to reset, reducing baseline levels of arousal and preserving the balance of neurotransmitters required for optimal functioning. Your dopamine, critical for motivation and drive, is not spent on petty arguments or reactive outbursts, but on tasks that build momentum toward your goals. Your serotonin, linked to mood and social behavior, remains stable, helping you maintain emotional equilibrium and deeper relationships. Your acetylcholine, responsible for focus and sustained attention, is available for deep work, learning, and creative problem-solving. Non-engagement is not a withdrawal from life, it's a redirection toward what matters most. In social terms, the benefits are equally significant. When you engage in conflict, particularly in front of others, you invite judgment, misinterpretation, and escalation. Emotional displays, no matter how justified, rarely change minds or improve outcomes. They often reinforce the problem or amplify the drama. When you choose not to engage, you signal maturity, self-possession, and clarity. You show that your time, energy, and peace are too valuable to be traded for momentary ego gratification. This creates an aura of authority and emotional intelligence that speaks louder than any words could. It's worth noting that not engaging does not mean you're suppressing your emotions. Suppression is when you deny or bottle up your feelings, which can lead to internal pressure and psychological harm. Strategic non-engagement is different. It means you're fully aware of your emotional reaction, but choose not to express it in that moment. Instead, you might journal it, reflect on it, or speak about it when the time and audience are appropriate. The key difference is agency. You are choosing the how, when, and if of your response, not being pulled into it by a reflexive emotional trigger. This kind of restraint builds what could be called neurochemical integrity. It means you're not burning through your neurotransmitter stores needlessly. You're not living on emotional credit. You're spending your energy where it creates value on relationships that enrich you, goals that inspire you, and habits that elevate you. This integrity is what leads to emotional resilience. You are less easily shaken, less easily drained, more capable of navigating life's challenges without being hijacked by them. Think of high performers, athletes, artists, entrepreneurs, leaders. They all understand this principle intuitively, even if they don't explain it in neurochemical terms. They know they can't afford to be distracted by every insult, slight, or inconvenience. Their energy must be reserved for performance, creation, and progress. That's why many of them are calm in crisis, silent when provoked, and focused in chaos. They've trained their nervous system not to give away energy that doesn't lead to growth. This is a skill anyone can develop. It starts with awareness. When you feel the urge to engage in an unproductive interaction, pause. Ask yourself, is this worth my energy? Will this matter tomorrow? Does this help me grow? That pause alone activates the prefrontal cortex and begins shifting your neurochemical profile toward regulation rather than reaction. With repetition, that pause becomes a habit, that habit becomes a trait, and that trait becomes a superpower. In a world that rewards constant reaction, on social media, in conversations, in the news, choosing not to engage can feel like swimming upstream. But it is precisely because it's rare that it's powerful. It's not about being silent for the sake of silence. It's about being strategic with your energy. You don't respond to every noise. You respond only to signals. You don't fight every battle. You pick the ones that shape your life. Ultimately, the ability to preserve your neurochemical energy is about honoring the finite nature of your attention, emotion, and time. You only get so much of each per day. Spend them wisely. Let your silence speak not of defeat or avoidance, but of discipline, intention, and strength, because what you don't engage in often defines your direction even more than what you do. In a world that constantly demands attention, provokes emotion, and thrives on reactivity, the most powerful form of dominance is non-reaction. It signals something deeper than strength. It signals sovereignty. It communicates that your internal state is not for sale, not at the mercy of others, and not easily manipulated. When someone tries to provoke you through insult, pressure, or manipulation, and you remain centered, calm, and unaffected, you send a clear message: you are not programmable. You are not running on scripts dictated by external forces. You are self-directed, internally governed, and mentally autonomous. Non-reaction is not about passivity or weakness. It's not the absence of feeling. In fact, it often comes at the peak of emotional intensity. You may feel anger, insult, or pain rising inside you, but instead of reacting automatically, you hold it. You don't act on it impulsively. This restraint isn't repression, it's refinement. You allow the emotion to exist without letting it dominate your behavior. That gap between stimulus and response is where real power lies. Most people don't operate from this place. They react immediately, predictably, and without pause. They follow neurological conditioning driven by the amygdala's threat detection systems. Their behavior is programmable because it is predictable. Say something offensive to them and they'll lash out. Challenge their status and they'll defend it. These are predictable script inputs followed by reactive outputs. But when you choose not to react, when you override the automatic programming, you enter into a rarer psychological state, one of command, not submission. You are no longer a puppet of circumstance or ego. You become the author of your own behavior. This is not a loud kind of dominance. It's a quiet, grounded authority that's far more unsettling to those who seek control. They can't find your buttons because you've stopped handing them the remote. People who seek to control others don't always do it overtly. They may not shout, threaten, or coerce. Often, control shows up through subtle emotional hooks, passive aggression, guilt trips, false urgency, or criticism. These behaviors are fishing lines cast out to see who will bite. The moment you react, you reveal that the bait worked. You show your hand. You show that your emotional state is accessible and controllable from the outside. This, to someone who plays power games, is a victory. Non-reaction denies them that victory. It breaks the loop. When you don't respond in the expected way, you disrupt their pattern. They are left uncertain, unable to categorize you. This confusion is not weakness on your part, it's strength. You're operating on a different frequency. You're no longer playing their game because you've realized that engaging in it is a form of submission, no matter how aggressive your role may seem. It's important to clarify that non-reaction doesn't mean silence in all situations. It means the absence of emotionally driven, compulsive response. It means choosing when and how to respond based on intelligence rather than instinct. Sometimes your most effective move will be to speak, act, or walk away. But what distinguishes these actions from reaction is that they come from a place of deliberate intention, not emotional compulsion. That is what makes them powerful. From a neurological perspective, this ability to pause and choose is governed by the prefrontal cortex, the part of the brain responsible for executive function, emotional regulation, and foresight. When someone says or does something provocative, your amygdala flares up. It wants to protect you, defend you, or retaliate. That's your limbic system acting out of survival. But when your prefrontal cortex is strong, it overrides that initial urge. It creates a space in which you can assess, interpret, and make decisions aligned with your higher self. This is why non-reaction is a form of dominance. It shows that your nervous system is not hijacked by external stressors. You have agency, you are grounded, and in a world of volatility and emotional manipulation, that groundedness is rare and deeply respected. even feared. People don't mess with someone who doesn't flinch. They don't toy with those who don't get pulled into emotional whirlwinds. They realize quickly that their typical tools, provocation, guilt, shame, don't work on you, and that makes you unpredictable in the best way. Psychologically, people expect to have some influence over others. They expect their words, tone, or energy to produce a reaction. When you don't give them that, they are forced to reflect on their own behavior. In some cases, they become confused or frustrated. In others, they become curious, even respectful. But most importantly, you stop rewarding negative behavior with your energy. You teach people that access to your emotional state is earned, not granted by default. This isn't about playing mind games or being emotionally distant. It's about protecting your inner landscape. Your peace is your power, and your power is in your ability to stay centered regardless of what's happening around you. This is dominance not in the sense of control over others, but control over yourself. It's the kind of quiet confidence that doesn't need to be announced, defended, or displayed. It is simply lived. In relationships, this type of non-reactivity builds trust. People learn that you are not volatile or easily provoked. They know they can speak with you without fearing emotional explosions. They understand that your actions come from values, not impulses. This creates psychological safety, which is the foundation of healthy connection. Ironically, the less reactive you are, the more deeply others feel drawn to you. You become a stable presence in an unstable world. In leadership, the effect is magnified. A leader who cannot control their own emotions will struggle to inspire or guide others. But a leader who doesn't react impulsively, who stays calm under pressure, who responds with thoughtfulness instead of drama, this is someone others naturally follow. Their composure becomes a source of stability. Their restraint becomes a form of respect. It takes practice to reach this level of inner mastery. It requires self-awareness, mindfulness, and the ability to sit with discomfort without acting on it. You must be willing to let your ego take a hit without rushing to defend it. You must be willing to be misunderstood without needing to explain yourself to everyone. You must be okay with walking away from battles that your peace cannot afford to lose. This is the deeper discipline behind non-reaction. Eventually, what once felt like restraint becomes your baseline. You no longer crave the last word, the rebuttal, or the applause. You don't feel the need to prove your worth in every conversation. You carry yourself with an internal assurance that cannot be shaken by external opinions, and in that stillness, in that sovereign silence, you find something stronger than dominance. It's dignity. Non-reaction, then, is not about detachment. It's about discretion. It's not coldness, it's control. It's not weakness, it's wisdom, and it's not avoidance, it's authority. When others realize they cannot control your mood, cannot predict your behavior, cannot trigger your emotions, they begin to understand that you are not programmable. You are not living in reaction to the world. You are creating your place in it, on your own terms.